There is a moment when people begin treating you differently, and most men completely misunderstand why it happens. You don't become more attractive because you suddenly learn the perfect words. You don't become more respected because you start pretending to be cold. You don't gain power because you ignore everyone or act like you don't care. The shift happens when people realize something much simpler. Your attention is valuable, and you are no longer giving it away automatically. Most men are too available. They answer every message immediately. They rearrange their schedule whenever someone asks. They cancel their own plans to accommodate other people. They keep conversations alive when the other person has already stopped contributing. They chase people who become distant. They constantly check whether someone is interested, whether someone is upset, whether someone still likes them. And they call this being caring. But there is a difference between being caring and being constantly accessible. Caring means you value someone. Being constantly available means you've allowed someone else's needs, emotions, and attention to dictate your time. And when people learn that you will always be there regardless of how they treat you, something changes. Your presence becomes predictable. Your attention becomes cheap. Your absence has no weight because your return is guaranteed. This doesn't mean you should play games. It doesn't mean you should intentionally ignore messages, disappear for days, or manufacture jealousy. Those are still forms of dependence because you're manipulating your availability in order to produce a reaction. Real power comes from something completely different, having a life that doesn't revolve around being needed. Imagine two men receiving a message from someone they care about. The first man immediately stops whatever he's doing, grabs his phone, responds within seconds, and then spends the next hour waiting for the next reply. His entire emotional state begins following the conversation. If the response comes quickly, he feels good. If it takes an hour, he becomes anxious. If the message is short, he wonders whether something is wrong. If there is no response, he starts imagining explanations. The second man sees the message, reads it, and continues what he was already doing. If he has time and genuinely wants to respond, he responds. If he's busy, he responds later. Not as a tactic, not because he's trying to appear mysterious, simply because his life was already happening before the message arrived. That difference is enormous. The second man isn't necessarily less interested. He's simply less dependent on immediate access to the other person's attention. And that emotional independence changes the entire dynamic. People notice when you have your own direction. They notice when you don't abandon your priorities every time they appear. They notice when you have boundaries around your time. They notice when you can enjoy their company without desperately needing their company. And this creates something that cannot be manufactured through manipulation: respect. Respect grows when people understand that your presence has standards. If you are available to everyone, for everything, at every moment, your availability becomes invisible. Think about something as simple as a resource. Water is essential, but if you have unlimited water available at every moment, you don't think about each glass. The resource becomes ordinary because there is no scarcity. Human attention works differently, but the psychological principle is similar. When someone knows they can access your attention whenever they want, they stop experiencing your attention as something meaningful. They begin expecting it. And expectation can quietly destroy appreciation. This is why some men become confused when someone loses interest after receiving everything they asked for. They think, I gave her attention. I was always there. I replied immediately. I showed her that I cared. Why did she pull away? Because attention without boundaries doesn't necessarily communicate value. Sometimes it communicates that you have nothing more important to do. And the message you send without realizing it is, you're always my priority, regardless of whether you make me a priority. That creates imbalance. Healthy relationships aren't built on one person constantly pursuing and the other constantly receiving. They're built on mutual investment. Both people contribute. Both people initiate. Both people make time. Both people respect the other's life. If you're always the one reaching out, always the one checking in, always the one making plans, always the one repairing the connection, you're not building intimacy. You're measuring how much effort you're willing to give before you finally admit that the effort isn't being returned. And this is where you need to become honest. Stop measuring someone's interest by what they say and start measuring it by what they consistently do. Someone can tell you that they care about you while repeatedly treating your time as disposable. Someone can say they miss you while never making an effort to see you. Someone can tell you that you're important while only contacting you when they need something. Words matter, but patterns matter more. And once you start observing patterns instead of chasing explanations, your behavior changes. You stop asking, why aren't they responding? And start asking, what does their behavior consistently show me? You stop asking, how can I make them interested again? And start asking, is this level of interest enough for me? That is a completely different psychological position. One is pursuit. The other is evaluation. One asks how to win someone. The other asks whether the relationship deserves your investment. This is one of the strongest changes a man can make. Stop auditioning for people. Stop trying to convince them that you're valuable. Stop constantly proving that you're loyal, available, generous, and interested. Let your behavior be consistent, but let the other person demonstrate their own interest. If they reach out, engage. If they make an effort, appreciate it. If they create space for you, create space for them. But if the entire connection depends on your effort, stop carrying it alone. Not as punishment, not to make them chase. Simply because you refuse to build relationships by yourself. And this principle applies beyond dating. At work, if you're always the person who says yes to every request, people eventually stop seeing your yes as generosity and start seeing it as availability. Your workload expands because everyone knows you'll accept it. Your boundaries disappear because nobody has experienced consequences for crossing them. The solution isn't becoming unhelpful. The solution is becoming selective. You can help people without becoming permanently accessible to them. You can be generous without being endlessly available. You can be a good friend without answering every call. You can love someone without abandoning your entire schedule whenever they want attention. You can be ambitious without apologizing for having priorities. This is where many men make the mistake of believing that boundaries will make people leave. Sometimes they will. But that's information, not necessarily failure. If someone only wants you when you're endlessly available, constantly agreeable, and willing to sacrifice yourself, then what they wanted may not have been you. They wanted access to you. And those are different things. A healthy person doesn't need unlimited access to prove that you care. They understand that you have work, responsibilities, goals, friends, family, hobbies, and moments when you simply want to be alone. They don't interpret every delay as rejection. They don't require constant reassurance. They don't punish you for having a life. They understand that connection becomes healthier when two complete people choose to share their lives rather than two incomplete people trying to become each other's entire world. That's why you should never intentionally become difficult to reach just to create desire. Instead, become genuinely occupied with something meaningful. Build a life that deserves your attention. Work on your body. Build your career. Learn something difficult. Spend time with people who matter. Develop your skills. Protect your sleep. Read. Travel when possible. Create. Build. Study. Train. And when someone enters your life, they become part of that life instead of becoming the replacement for it. This distinction changes everything. If you have nothing going on, you'll naturally overinvest in whoever gives you attention. Their message becomes the most exciting event of your day. Their silence becomes the most painful. Their approval becomes the most important. But if your life already contains purpose, one person's attention becomes something you appreciate rather than something you depend on. That's emotional independence. And emotional independence is attractive not because it's a trick, but because it creates stability. Nobody wants to feel responsible for another person's entire emotional state. When someone knows that your happiness depends on their messages, their affection, and their approval, the relationship becomes heavy. Every interaction carries pressure. Every disagreement feels dangerous. Every moment of distance feels like a crisis. But when you can say, I enjoy having you in my life, but I will still be okay if you are not, you remove that pressure. You can finally interact from choice instead of fear. And that changes how you communicate. You don't send 5 messages because someone hasn't answered. You don't invent excuses to see them. You don't create unnecessary conversations because you're afraid the connection will disappear. You don't keep asking where the relationship is going because you're terrified of uncertainty. You let reality reveal itself. If someone wants to be there, their actions will gradually show it. If they don't, no amount of chasing will create genuine desire. That's one of the hardest lessons to accept, but also one of the most liberating. You cannot negotiate someone into wanting you. You cannot explain yourself into being valued. You cannot give unlimited attention until someone suddenly develops appreciation. And you cannot sacrifice enough of yourself to guarantee that another person stays. What you can do is become someone who chooses carefully where his time and attention go. Because your attention is not infinite. Every hour you spend chasing someone is an hour you cannot spend building yourself. Every evening you spend staring at your phone is an evening you could have spent improving your life. Every conversation where you desperately try to recover someone's interest is energy that could have been invested in someone who already appreciates your presence. This doesn't mean becoming transactional. It means becoming conscious. Ask yourself, where's my attention going? Who receives the best version of me? Who gets my time? Who gets my energy? And am I receiving something meaningful in return? If the answer is consistently no, something needs to change. Not because you need to punish anyone, because your time is your life. You don't get it back. And once you truly understand that, being constantly available starts to feel less like kindness and more like self-neglect. You begin recognizing that saying no is not rejection. It is allocation. When you say no to something unnecessary, you're saying yes to something else. Your health, your goals, your peace, your family, your work, your future, your self-respect. And when people see that your time has structure, they become more intentional about how they use it. This is where respect develops naturally. People know that if they want your attention, they need to approach you with consideration. They don't assume you'll drop everything. They don't assume you'll tolerate anything. They don't assume you'll always be waiting. Your availability becomes a choice rather than a default setting. And that is a major psychological shift. The man who is always waiting has little leverage over his own life. The man who is living his life can decide when to engage. Again, this is not about manipulating other people. It's about refusing to manipulate yourself. Stop pretending that you don't have priorities just because you're afraid someone might be disappointed. Stop pretending that you don't care just to make someone chase you. Stop playing timing games. Stop calculating how long to wait before replying. Those behaviors keep you emotionally attached to the exact reaction you're pretending not to care about. If you're watching the clock thinking, it's been 2 hours, so I should wait another hour, you're still controlled by the other person. Real independence is simpler. You respond when you're available and when you genuinely want to respond. Sometimes that's immediately. Sometimes it's later. There is no strategy. There is simply a life. And that life should be full enough that you don't need to manufacture scarcity. You already have priorities. You already have things that matter. You already have a direction. That is what makes your attention valuable. Not because you withhold it, but because you have something worth protecting. And if you want to build that kind of emotional independence even further, that's exactly what the Dark Mind Protocol is designed around. The complete protocol and the 5 additional resources focus on emotional control, psychological awareness, strategic communication, boundaries, self-respect, and understanding power dynamics without turning your life into a collection of cheap manipulation tricks. The goal isn't to make people obsessed with you by playing games. The goal is to make you so grounded that you no longer need to chase anyone for validation. The link is available in the description and pinned comment if you want to go deeper. But even without it, start with one simple change today. Stop giving people automatic access to you. Before you answer, ask whether you actually have time. Before you accept, ask whether you genuinely want to. Before you cancel your plans, ask whether the situation deserves that sacrifice. Before you chase someone who has become distant, look at the pattern instead of inventing explanations. And before you make yourself constantly available to someone, ask whether they are equally available to you. These questions will reveal where your energy is being wasted. And once you begin protecting that energy, something strange happens. You don't have to announce that you've changed. People simply notice. They notice that you're not constantly waiting. They notice that you have your own plans. They notice that you don't panic when they disappear. They notice that you don't chase when they pull away. They notice that you can enjoy their attention without needing it. And that is when your presence begins to carry more weight. Not because you became unavailable, because you became intentional. Your presence means something because you chose to give it. Your attention means something because you don't give it to everyone automatically. Your time means something because you protect it. And your absence means something because your life continues without needing anyone's permission. Remember this. You don't become more valuable by making people afraid of losing you. You become more valuable by refusing to lose yourself just to keep them. That's the difference between manipulation and self-respect, between strategy and desperation, between pretending not to care and genuinely having a life that matters. So stop asking, how can I make them miss me? Ask, why am I spending so much time trying to make someone notice my absence? Stop asking, how long should I wait before replying? Ask, why isn't my attention already connected to something meaningful? Stop asking, how do I make them respect me? Ask, what behavior am I currently teaching people to expect from me? Because respect isn't created by demanding that people value you. It's created by showing through your choices that you value yourself. And once you understand that, you stop chasing. You stop overgiving. You stop abandoning your priorities. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You become selective, calm, intentional. You give attention because you want to, not because you're afraid of losing someone. You make time because the relationship deserves it, not because you're terrified of being forgotten. You stay because you choose to stay, not because you don't know how to leave. And you walk away when the relationship consistently asks you to sacrifice your dignity for access. That's when availability stops being a weakness and becomes a choice. And the man who controls his choices controls something far more important than anyone else's attention. He controls his own life.